Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about the demographics and the culture of Texas, specifically the political demographics inside of the state. Texas currently is one of the most diverse states in the United States. It's actually ranked fifth out of all the states in the country, with Hispanics and Latinos making up over 40% of the population, okay, with non-Hispanic white people, Caucasians making up 38.8%, African Americans 13%, Asians at 6%, and then other demographics making up about 1%. That would be like Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, things like that. Because of that diversity inside of the state, we have a lot of different languages spoken here. So roughly 65-70% of everyone in Texas can speak English. Spanish is at 30%, Vietnamese 1%, Chinese 5.5%, Tagalog 4%, 20% of everyone in the state of Texas, so 1 in 5 people, is actually bilingual. A lot of us speak different languages inside the state, and it shouldn't be any surprise. Texas is huge. It takes the same amount of time to drive all the way across Texas as it does to cover the entirety of England from top to bottom. So from left to right in Texas and from top to bottom in England takes the same amount of time. That's why we measure distance here a lot of the time in hours as opposed to miles like in other places. Now, one of the things about us being so big is when it comes to Texas, people tend to know where it is. They tend to know what's kind of going on here. Now, sometimes it's exaggerated. I was in South America off and on for a long time. People know where Texas is. They have some idea of the culture here, albeit really, really exaggerated. They still think, some people, that we ride around on horses and everybody owns a gun. Obviously, not all of that is true all of the time, but that's an idea that they have. Sometimes it's fun to correct them. Sometimes it's fun not to. The ages in Texas range, but we're actually a pretty young population. 25% of the population of Texas is under 18. Only 15% is over 65. So that age range between 18 and 64 in the state of Texas is 60%. We have a pretty young population. Women, you guys outnumber men. Barely, but you do outnumber men in the state of Texas. We make up a little over 50% of the population, 50.3% men, 49.7%. Now, the politics of the state, with it being so big, are kind of interesting, okay? The Texas Constitution emphasizes a government with limited powers derived from a belief that power is inherent in the people. We do not like to be controlled. That's why the way that our government is set up right now, and the way that it was in the past, has always tried to limit that state power and pass most of those decisions onto the people of the state. This started from the very beginning when Sam Houston was the first president of the Republic of Texas. When we weren't even part of the United States, we were all about small government with strong local government to make the decisions for us. In Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution, it states that Texans have the right to alter, reform, or abolish their government. We vote on everything. We vote on amendments to the Texas State Constitution, and it's really one of the only ways that any kind of permanent changes can be made in the state. Also why we have one of the largest constitutions in the country. Not the largest, but we are up there, definitely. Our local governments control pretty much everything. They have significant autonomy in handling their public services and their taxation. Okay, so property taxes, for example, a very small percentage of that goes to the state, but the majority of property taxes, if you own a home, those are coming from your local government, from your schools, from the bonds, from things like that. Our preference is essentially that we want our government to be public, or at least close to home, right? Texans' office challenges the mandates emphasizing state sovereignty. We challenge the federal government on a regular basis. A lot of the things that have been changed for the entire country started in Texas, and that's rooted again in the fact that Texas is used to being independent, being on their own, right? They were the republic, they left, and they became part of the Confederate States. When they finally came back into the United States, they were actually the last state of the Confederate States to be allowed back in, because the state of Texas was refusing to change some of the articles inside of their Constitution. Now, historically, we have some issues with voting. We have a very low voter turnout, okay? Generally, under 40% of people that are eligible to vote in the state of Texas actually show up to vote. And it's kind of an understanding that Texas is really conservative and that we are a Republican state, basically, right? It always shows up red on voting maps. The truth is, Texas has always been conservative, but we weren't always a Republican state. For the longest portion of Texas history, since joining the United States, Texas has voted Democrat. Those things started to change around the 1920s and 30s whenever FDR put in the New Deal, what changed us from dual federalism to cooperative federalism. They would change even more later on when Johnson would switch us with some other things, whenever he would sign the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voter Rights Act. When those two things happened, the South in general, not just Texas, were mostly Democrat, and they were what was called Dixiecrats, so the Southern Democrats. After the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the Voters' Rights Act, the Republican Party started to move in and started pushing for states' rights, something that regularly would have been coming from the Democrat Party. And they were able to push the Democrats in the South to the Republican Party. Now, this wouldn't happen overnight. It would happen slowly. But by the 1980s, the Republicans pretty much had a stronghold in the South. There's been a few things that have changed more recently. For example, Texas voter ID laws. That is not something that we've had since the 1965 Voters' Rights Act, but after a lawsuit out of Alabama, it was Shelby County v. Holder. The voters' ID laws that came along with the Voters' Rights Act got thrown out, and things started to change back over. So, across the state of Texas, with it being so big, we do still have differences in the way that we vote. So, for example, if you take bigger cities, Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, those all tend to lean Democrat. The rural areas, though, mainly still vote Republican, but we can see in our representatives in the House that we do have plenty of areas that still vote Democrat inside of the state of Texas. In reality, this is really more of a purple state. We're not quite a swing state, but it's not to say that that couldn't happen eventually. Now, regional politics in Texas change wildly. East Texas, more conservative, more based in agriculture. West Texas, more around ranching. Central Texas is more tech-driven, and South Texas has a really diverse Hispanic population. Throughout the entire history of Texas, we've actually had 39 Democrat governors while only having 7 Republican governors up till date. Taxes in Texas, again, they are set pretty much mostly at the local level, but as far as sales tax in the state of Texas go, it's set at 6.25% unless your county has raised it, which generally they can only go up to 2%. If you live in this area, we're paying about 8.25 on almost everything that we actually buy. Now, Texas does have a lot of tax incentives, things like that, to bring businesses into the state. But the biggest thing that really started bringing people into the state of Texas was the Spindletop Gusher in 1901. It was producing 100,000 barrels per day. That was when they finally found oil. It led to the rise of boom towns like Beaumont, Odessa, and even Kilgore, Texas, all started forming after the Spindletop oil boom. Now, Texas remains a leading oil producer. It accounts for 40% of all U.S. crude oil produced inside of the country. Okay. We also, on top of that, have major tech hubs here. Austin is home to Dell, Oracle, Tesla, Apple, Google. All of those things are operating right out of Austin, Texas. Dallas has IT centers, AT&T. We also have AI centers starting to move into the state. We're generally becoming very, very friendly for all of that. Now, food-wise in Texas, we have Tex-Mex, barbecue, chili, Bluebell ice cream, all kinds of different things that we kind of run into inside the state. But we're known for a whole lot more than that. We're known for music. We're known for our pastimes, for high school football, rodeos, outdoors, all kinds of things that people look at, they see, and they know that those things are ideally Texas, right? Now, again, we have some things that are basically just us, right? We have our state flower. We have the bluebonnet. We have the mockingbird, our state bird. We have The fact that we can fly the Texas state flag at the same level as the United States flag without that being an issue. It's the only state that's allowed to do that. There's a lot of things that are only available in Texas. But overall, we've become an integral part of the United States. We're really important to the way that things are set up there. And mainly that's because of the diversity in the state. Because we are so different over such a large area, we're able to do so much more than to be in kind of a small box. Now, a lot of people think that Texas can leave the United States. We get to become our own country again, that it's in our Constitution. Now, the fact is, it did used to be. It's not anymore. Since the Civil War, that has not been a thing. Texas could technically split into smaller states, but that would take votes on our part as well as an act of the federal legislature. So it's really unlikely that that will ever happen in our future. But this, amongst other things, makes us strong, makes us able to actually continue on and to grow more so than we would, I think, if we were smaller and less diverse. All right, thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and there will be some other videos to help kind of round everything out, and I will talk to you next week.